When I spoke out about her brother's affair, she snapped, "Family first." That night, I packed my bags. What started as small compromises in the name of family harmony slowly evolved into something I barely recognized as my own life. I'm Carter, and for 3 years, I thought I was building something real with Whitney in Nashville. I work as a software developer for a healthcare startup, nothing glamorous but stable, while Whitney's a nurse at Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. On paper, we made sense, both of us in our late 20s, both caring about helping people, both wanting the same future of marriage and kids someday. But every weekend, our life revolved entirely around Whitney's family, specifically her twin brother Ryan and his wife Hannah. They'd been married 5 years with 2 young children, Emma and Jake, ages 4 and 2. Ryan worked as a real estate broker specializing in luxury properties, the kind of guy who wore expensive suits and drove a BMW he leased new every 2 years. Their lake house outside Nashville became our second home. And by second home, I mean I spent every Saturday and Sunday there whether I wanted to or not. Family time is sacred, Whitney would say whenever I suggested we might stay home one weekend, maybe work on our own place or just relax together. Ryan works so hard all week, and Hannah needs the help with the kids. What she really meant was that questioning family time was questioning her, and questioning her meant questioning the foundation of who she was as Ryan's twin sister. I should have seen the pattern earlier. But love makes you rationalize things that should send you running. Ryan had this way of making comments that sounded like jokes but cut deep enough to leave marks. "Must be nice having a job where you can work in pajamas all day," he'd say when I mentioned remote work. "I'm out here actually meeting clients, building relationships, making real money." When Whitney would laugh along with these observations, I'd tell myself she was just keeping the peace. When Ryan started calling my student loans Carter's anchor, during family dinners, I realized peacekeeping looked suspiciously like taking sides. "You're overthinking it," Whitney would tell me during our drives home. "Ryan doesn't mean anything by it. He's just competitive. You need to try harder to fit in with the family. Try harder." As if enduring constant criticism about my career, my personality, my financial situation wasn't effort enough. The real turning point came during a barbecue in May when Ryan decided my boring tech job needed a full analysis in front of Hannah's parents. Software development, right? That's like being a glorified calculator. Anyone can learn to code these days. There are 12-year-olds on YouTube doing what Carter does for a living. Hannah looked uncomfortable, shifting baby Jake in her arms and avoiding eye contact. Whitney just smiled and nodded like her brother had made some profound observation about the nature of technology careers. When I tried to explain that healthcare software literally saves lives by streamlining patient data, Ryan cut me off with a wave. Sure. Very important stuff. But let's be real, you're basically pushing buttons all day while I'm out here closing million-dollar deals and building actual relationships with successful people. That night, I asked Whitney directly why she never defended me during these conversations. "Because you're being too sensitive," she said, not looking up from her phone. "Ryan's successful and confident. Maybe instead of getting defensive, you could learn something from him about ambition." Learn something about ambition from someone who inherited his father's client list and spent most of his workday playing golf with potential buyers. The criticism about my salary was particularly rich coming from someone whose twin sister subsidized his lifestyle by covering groceries, babysitting costs, and weekend entertainment whenever his commission checks ran thin. But pointing out these financial realities was apparently jealousy and evidence that I couldn't handle being around successful people. By summer, I realized Whitney's identity was so completely enmeshed with Ryan's approval that criticizing him was like criticizing her. They shared this weird dynamic where his success was her success, his opinions were her opinions, and his comfort was her primary concern. When I suggested we spend some weekends working on our own relationship instead of constantly playing supporting roles in Ryan's family drama, Whitney accused me of trying to isolate her from the people who actually matter. The people who actually matter. Not me, apparently. I was just the guy who helped pay rent and provided emotional support when convenient. I started pushing back against Ryan's increasingly personal attacks, which only made Whitney more defensive and accusatory toward me. "You're jealous of what Ryan has accomplished," she said after I called out his comment about my participation trophy generation work ethic. You can't handle being around successful people without making everything about yourself. The irony wasn't lost on me that someone who spent 40 hours a week debugging medical software that kept patients alive was being lectured about participation trophies by someone whose biggest achievement was inheriting daddy's real estate contacts. But Whitney saw my growing frustration as character defects rather than reasonable responses to constant disrespect. The 4th of July barbecue was when everything reached a breaking point that should have ended our relationship right there. Ryan had just made partner at his firm, a promotion he'd been working toward for 2 years, and he decided to announce it in the most humiliating way possible. Big news, everyone, he said, tapping his beer bottle with a fork like he was giving a wedding toast. Your boy just became the youngest partner in Henderson and Associates history. 7 figures, baby. 7 figures before 30. The family erupted in congratulations while I offered polite applause, genuinely happy for his success despite everything. But Ryan wasn't finished. You know what the best part is? Finally being around people who understand real ambition. People who didn't peak in college and spend their 20s playing video games in their pajamas. He looked directly at me during this observation, Whitney laughing along with her parents like he'd delivered the punchline of the century. Hannah shifted uncomfortably, bouncing Emma on her lap and avoiding eye contact with everyone. Some people are builders, Ryan continued, clearly enjoying his audience. Some people create value, close deals, make things happen in the real world. And some people, well, some people fix other people's mistakes for hourly wages. The family laughed harder while I sat there wondering how Whitney could find this entertaining rather than mortifying. When I tried to leave early, claiming I had work to catch up on, Whitney followed me to the car. You're being ridiculous, she said. Ryan's celebrating a huge achievement, and you're making it about yourself again. He literally called me a failure in front of your entire family. He was joking around. You're too sensitive about everything. That night, I suggested we start spending some weekends alone, maybe work on our own apartment, explore Nashville together, build our own traditions instead of constantly orbiting Ryan's social schedule. Whitney's reaction was immediate and explosive. You're trying to isolate me from my family. That's what controlling men do. They separate women from their support systems. Support systems. Ryan's constant criticism was apparently support, while my desire to spend quality time with my girlfriend was manipulation. I just want some weekends that are about us, I explained. Every Saturday and Sunday revolves around Ryan's family. We never do anything alone anymore. Because family comes first, Whitney said like she was explaining basic math. Ryan and Hannah need help with the kids. My parents love having everyone together. This is what families do. What about our family? What about building something together? Whitney stared at me like I'd suggested we join a cult. We're not married, Carter. They're my actual family. Ryan's my twin brother. That bond is irreplaceable. Irreplaceable. Unlike me, apparently. I realized Whitney's identity was so completely merged with Ryan's that she couldn't separate his success from her own self-worth. When people complimented Ryan, she glowed like she'd personally achieved something. When anyone questioned Ryan's behavior, she took it as a personal attack on her judgment and character. She'd rather have a boyfriend who silently endured constant humiliation than one who threatened the family dynamics that made her feel important and valued. The discovery that changed everything happened on a random Tuesday in August while I was helping Whitney organize her home office for a work presentation. She'd asked me to sort through some old files on her computer, clean up desktop folders, basic digital housekeeping that would take me 20 minutes but would have taken her hours. I was moving documents into proper folders when I accidentally clicked on a hidden directory buried deep in her photo library. What I found there made me physically sick. Screenshots of text messages between Ryan and multiple women, photos that definitely weren't meant for family viewing, hotel receipts, and most damaging of all, a detailed record of Whitney's role in facilitating these affairs. There were texts from Ryan, Whitney's babysitting the kids tonight, coast is clear until midnight. Tell Whitney to book the usual room at the Marriott, client meeting excuse. Whitney handled Hannah's questions about the Phoenix trip, we're good. The evidence went back over a year, showing Ryan's affairs with his real estate assistant, several clients, and even a married woman whose house he'd helped sell. But what made me physically nauseous was seeing Whitney's responses. Hannah bought the work conference story completely. Booked your room under my name again, receipt in your glove compartment. I'll keep Hannah busy with the kids this weekend, have fun. When Whitney came home and found me staring at her laptop screen, she went completely white. For a long moment, we just looked at each other while the weight of what I'd discovered settled between us. Carter, I can explain everything, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been helping him cheat on Hannah for over a year. It's not that simple. You don't understand the whole situation. I scrolled through more messages, feeling sicker with each revelation. You've been babysitting his kids while he sleeps with other women. You've been lying to Hannah's face for months. How is this complicated? Whitney broke down completely then, tears streaming as she tried to explain the inexplicable. It started after Hannah's difficult pregnancy with Jake. She was dealing with postpartum depression, wasn't intimate with Ryan for months. He was lonely and emotionally neglected. I was just trying to help him through a rough patch. Help him cheat on his wife while she was struggling with mental health issues? Hannah's better off not knowing, Whitney sobbed. She's happy with the kids, focused on being a mom. Why destroy that over Ryan's mistakes? Sometimes protecting people from painful truths is more compassionate than forcing them to face reality they can't handle. I stared at her, wondering how someone I'd loved for 3 years had become a stranger defending the indefensible. You think Hannah's better off being exposed to STDs without her knowledge? Better off making major life decisions based on lies? Better off thinking her marriage is solid while her husband spends their savings on hotel rooms? Ryan gets tested regularly. He's careful about protection. And he does love Hannah and the kids. This is just physical release, not emotional betrayal. Physical release. Like Hannah was some kind of appliance that had temporarily malfunctioned, so naturally Ryan needed to find alternative arrangements. Listen to yourself, Whitney. You're talking about Hannah like she's not even human. Like her feelings and choices don't matter. Her feelings do matter. That's exactly why I've been protecting her from information that would devastate her unnecessarily. Ryan's planning to end these relationships soon anyway. Hannah doesn't need to suffer for his temporary weaknesses. Temporary weaknesses that had been ongoing for over a year, with Whitney's active participation and financial support. I looked at the woman I'd planned to propose to someday and realized I didn't know her at all. The Whitney I'd fallen in love with would never have facilitated adultery, would never have lied to a friend's face, would never have justified betrayal as compassion. But maybe that Whitney had never existed. Maybe I'd been in love with someone who was just better at hiding her true priorities. I gave Whitney an ultimatum that felt both generous and naive in retrospect. 2 weeks to either convince Ryan to confess everything to Hannah or I would tell her myself. Hannah deserves to know the truth, I said. She deserves the right to make informed decisions about her health, her marriage, and her future. Whitney's response was to declare war on me using every manipulation tactic in the book. Within days, she'd enlisted our mutual friends to pressure me into staying out of family business. Sarah from her nursing program called to tell me I was being unnecessarily cruel and should support Whitney during this difficult time. Mark, a guy we'd double-dated with, suggested I was overreacting and should let the family handle their own problems. Even Whitney's parents got involved, with her mother calling to explain how devastated Whitney was by my unreasonable demands and how I needed to be more understanding of complex family dynamics. When social pressure failed, Whitney escalated to emotional blackmail. If you destroy my family, I'll kill myself, she sobbed during one of our many fights. Ryan's children will grow up without their father because of you. My parents will never recover from losing both their children's marriages. Is that what you want? When I remained unmoved by threats of suicide, she switched to seduction and promises of marriage. We can get engaged, she said, suddenly interested in the future she'd always been vague about. We can start planning our own family. I'll be different, I promise. Just don't destroy everything my brother has built. But the most disturbing escalation came when I discovered Whitney had been secretly recording our private conversations about Ryan's affairs. "If you go to Hannah," she said, playing back audio of me discussing the evidence, "I'll tell everyone you've been stalking my family. I'll say you're obsessed with destroying Ryan because you're jealous of his success. I'll make you look like an unstable ex-boyfriend who can't handle rejection." The recording was edited to remove context, making my concern for Hannah sound like vindictive plotting against Ryan. Whitney had spent 2 weeks building a narrative that I was mentally unstable, documenting my erratic behavior and obsessive focus on her family's private business. She turned our relationship into evidence for her defense strategy instead of using the time to address the actual problem. "You're going to claim I'm stalking your family because I want to tell Hannah her husband is cheating? I'm protecting my family from someone who's clearly lost perspective. You're so focused on hurting Ryan that you don't care about the innocent people who'll get caught in the crossfire. Innocent people like Hannah, who was living a lie. Like Ryan's children, who deserved a father who respected their mother. Or innocent people like Ryan, who just needed understanding while he betrayed his wife's trust and spent their family's money on affairs." The 2 weeks passed with Whitney making zero effort to address Ryan's behavior or convince him to confess. Instead, she used the time to build her case against me, gathering character witnesses who would testify to my jealousy and controlling behavior if I went public with the truth. She'd chosen protecting Ryan's reputation over Hannah's right to know, chosen family loyalty over basic human decency, chosen her comfortable lies over uncomfortable truth. When I told her the deadline had passed and I was meeting with Hannah the next day, Whitney's mask finally dropped completely. "You'll regret this for the rest of your life," she said, her voice cold and calculated. "I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you really are. Vindictive, jealous, pathetic. Hannah won't believe you anyway. She'll choose Ryan over some random guy she barely knows." Maybe Whitney was right about Hannah not believing me. But at least Hannah would have the information she needed to make her own choices about her life and her children's future. I arranged to meet Hannah at Emma's preschool pickup, a public place where she'd feel safe and we wouldn't be interrupted by family members trying to control the narrative. When I showed her the evidence on my phone, her initial reaction was disbelief, then recognition, then a horrible kind of relief that made me realize she'd been suspicious for months. "I knew something was wrong," she said, staring at the screenshots of text messages. "Ryan's been coming home late constantly, claiming new clients needed evening meetings. Whitney always had explanations for everything: work conferences, client dinners, networking events. I trusted her completely because she's supposed to be my friend." The financial records hit her hardest because they showed the scope of Whitney's involvement. Hotel bookings on Whitney's credit card, restaurant charges for 2 people during Ryan's supposed business trips, even spa treatments and jewelry purchases that Hannah had never seen. Whitney booked these rooms. Whitney paid for his affairs while I was home with sick kids, wondering why we were always short on money for groceries. Hannah's voice cracked as she scrolled through months of evidence. "She was my sister-in-law, my friend. She helped me through postpartum depression after Jake was born. She babysat my children while my husband was sleeping with other women." Within an hour of our conversation, Hannah confronted Ryan with everything. The phone call I received from Whitney that evening was pure hysteria. "You destroyed my entire family," she screamed. Hannah's threatening to tell Ryan's business partners about the client affairs. "He could lose his license. His career is over because of you." But Ryan's confession under pressure revealed even more devastating betrayals. The affairs hadn't started after Jake's birth like Whitney claimed, they'd been ongoing since before Ryan and Hannah's wedding day. One affair was with Whitney's college roommate during Hannah's first pregnancy with Emma. Another was with a neighbor Hannah considered a close friend. Ryan had been systematically betraying his wife for their entire marriage while Whitney helped him cover it up. Hannah's filing for divorce. Whitney sobbed over the phone. "She's taking the kids. My parents found out everything and they're horrified with both of us. Ryan's talking about killing himself because his whole life is falling apart." The confrontation moved to my apartment when Whitney showed up uninvited, still in her scrubs from a nursing shift, looking wild and desperate. "You have to help me fix this," she demanded. "Call Hannah and tell her you lied. Say you fabricated the evidence because you were jealous of Ryan. I'm not going to lie for you anymore, Whitney. This isn't about me. It's about Emma and Jake. They're going to grow up without their father because of your vindictive revenge fantasy. When I refused to participate in more lies, Whitney tried to destroy my laptop, which contained backup copies of all the evidence. The struggle over my computer led to her scratching my face and throwing furniture before neighbors called the police about the disturbance. Watching Whitney get escorted out of my apartment by officers was the final confirmation that the woman I'd loved had never really existed. The real Whitney was someone who would destroy evidence of her brother's crimes, assault her boyfriend for telling the truth, and prioritize maintaining comfortable lies over protecting innocent people from ongoing betrayal. The police report documented her attempt to destroy evidence and assault charges that would follow her for years, all because she couldn't accept that actions have consequences and truth eventually surfaces no matter how many people conspire to bury it. I moved out of our shared apartment immediately and stayed with my cousin Jake while Whitney faced the complete collapse of every relationship that had defined her identity. Hannah filed for divorce within a week and shared the full truth with Whitney's parents, who were horrified to discover their daughter had been actively facilitating adultery for over a year. "We raised her better than this," Whitney's mother told me when she called to apologize. "We had no idea she was capable of such deception and cruelty toward Hannah and those innocent children." 3 weeks after the explosion, Whitney appeared at my workplace during lunch break, having lost at least 15 pounds and looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, and she had this desperate, hollow look that made my coworkers stare as she approached my desk. "Carter, please, we need to talk," she said, ignoring the curious looks from my team. "I know I messed up everything, but I've learned from my mistakes. I can be the girlfriend you actually deserved." I walked her outside to avoid making more of a scene, but her desperation was immediate and overwhelming. "I'll testify against Ryan in the divorce proceedings," she offered. "I'll tell the court everything about his affairs, his financial manipulation, his emotional abuse of Hannah. I'll help Hannah get full custody and maximum support." The offer was both shocking and revealing. Whitney was willing to completely destroy her twin brother to win me back, proving she'd learned nothing about loyalty or principles. "I'll even move to another city with you," she continued. "We can start fresh somewhere nobody knows about this mess. I'll cut all contact with my family if that's what it takes." When I asked her what she would do if faced with similar situations in the future, Whitney's answers revealed she still fundamentally misunderstood the problem. "I tell you first before making any decisions," she said. "I get your input on how to handle family problems." Not that she wouldn't facilitate affairs or lie to friends, just that she'd consult me first about her deceptions. "What if your future sister-in-law was being cheated on and you discovered it?" I pressed. "Would you tell her immediately?" Whitney hesitated, then said, "I'd probably talk to you about the best approach. Maybe suggest family counseling first, see if we could fix things without causing unnecessary drama." Unnecessary drama. She still saw Hannah's right to know the truth as optional, still believed protecting comfortable lies was sometimes the kinder choice. "Ryan attempted suicide last week," she said when she realized her promises weren't working. "He overdosed on sleeping pills after losing his real estate license. Hannah found him and called 911, but she won't let him see the kids now. My parents are talking about disowning both of us. Everyone I love is gone because you couldn't just stay quiet." Even facing the complete destruction of her family, Whitney framed Ryan's suicide attempt as my fault rather than the consequence of years of lies finally catching up with him. She couldn't accept that Hannah had every right to protect her children from a father who demonstrated such complete disregard for their family's well-being and financial security. The conversation ended when I asked her directly, "If we had children together and I was having affairs, would you want someone to tell you?" Whitney's answer was immediate. "That's different. We'd be married. We'd work through problems together instead of involving outsiders." Still believing that marriage vows created different moral standards, still convinced that family loyalty trumped basic human decency, still unable to understand that enabling someone's destructive behavior isn't love but cowardice disguised as compassion. I ended our relationship definitively that day, explaining to Whitney that her fundamental inability to distinguish between loyalty and enabling made her unsuitable as a life partner and especially as a potential mother to future children. Someone who would help facilitate affairs and lie to protect the perpetrator can't be trusted with the emotional well-being of innocent people, I told her. You've shown me exactly who you are when faced with moral choices, and that's not someone I want building a family with. 6 months later, the full consequences of Whitney's choices had reshaped her entire world in ways I learned through mutual friends who still kept in touch. Hannah had won full custody of Emma and Jake after Ryan's mental health crisis led to a complete breakdown requiring inpatient psychiatric treatment. The court found that Ryan's pattern of deception, financial irresponsibility, and unstable behavior made him unfit for unsupervised visitation with his children. Whitney had been cut off financially by her parents after they discovered she'd used their credit cards to book hotels for Ryan's affairs, essentially making them unwitting accomplices in funding adultery. We can't trust her judgment about anything anymore, her father told my cousin Jake when they ran into each other at a Nashville Predators game. Every conversation we had about Hannah and the kids was contaminated by lies we didn't know we were participating in. Whitney was forced to move back in with her parents while attending court-mandated therapy as part of a plea deal for the assault charges from our final confrontation. Ryan was living in a halfway house after his suicide attempt, had lost his real estate license permanently due to ethics violations involving client relationships, and had no contact with his children per Hannah's restraining order. The family that Whitney had prioritized above all else, including basic moral principles, had completely disintegrated because truth eventually surfaces no matter how many people conspire to bury it. Meanwhile, I started dating Grace, a pediatric nurse from my gym who shared my values about honesty and accountability in relationships. Our first serious conversation happened when she told me about reporting a coworker who was stealing medications, despite knowing it would cost him his job and create drama in their unit. Sometimes doing the right thing hurts people you care about, she said. But enabling destructive behavior isn't kindness, it's cowardice that usually makes everything worse in the long run. Grace had grown up with an alcoholic father and enabling mother, so she understood firsthand how protecting people from consequences doesn't help them grow or change. We bonded over our mutual experiences with family dysfunction and the importance of setting healthy boundaries even when it feels cruel in the moment. When I told her about Whitney and Ryan's situation, Grace's response was immediate. Hannah deserved to make informed decisions about her health and her children's future. What Whitney did wasn't loyalty, it was participating in abuse. 8 months after leaving Whitney, I proposed to Grace during a quiet dinner at home, no dramatic gestures or expensive rings, just two people who'd found each other and wanted to build something honest together. She said yes while laughing about my nervous rambling, then got serious. I promise to always tell you hard truths even when they hurt, and I expect the same from you. That's what real partnership looks like. Two people committed to honesty even when it's uncomfortable, accountability even when it's difficult, and protecting each other through transparency rather than deception. Whitney taught me that enabling someone isn't love but fear disguised as compassion, and that true loyalty sometimes requires the courage to do difficult things that ultimately serve everyone's best interests, including the person you're refusing to enable.